Okay. Hey, Brittney, good to see you again.
Too.
How you doing? Happy
I'm
Friday.
good. Happy Friday. I'm happy it's Friday. It's Halloween. It's fun. And it's pretty sunny in Brooklyn. So,
Oh, amazing. Love it. Love it. I'm based in Denver, as you know, and we got a little bit of snow yesterday. And
oh, wow.
so winter is officially here
It's
upon us.
officially here.
But I think it's gonna be pretty warm today. And this weekend. So not yet. It was just a preview. Amazing. Well, Brittney, so great to have you here with us. And Brittney Diaz, you're an alumni of the Impact Accelerator.
Yes.
And so tell us more about your venture, right? It's called Looking Lens.
Oh,
You got an opportunity to pitch at the uh, 10-year anniversary demo day in Phoenix, Arizona. What was it, 2-3 weeks ago?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so folks there got to learn about the work that you do. But yeah, we'd love to have you share with our friends over on LinkedIn what your work's about. So tell us about Looking Lens.
Yes. So, I'm the co founder of Looking Lens. So, we
Mhm.
create stories that inspire Black and Brown children to reach their full potential. So, right now, we are working on a book series called Ava and May. So,
Mhm.
these are the first characters to come from Looking Lens. And our goal is really to increase representation and increase positive portrayals of Black and Brown children. Because
Mhm.
in the media, when we do get representation, um, a lot of it is just historical trauma or stereotypes or tropes. And so there's a lot of value in putting different people in protagonist roles, and
Mhm.
that has a really big impact on development.
Mhm.
So right now we are working on Ava and May. So Ava and May teaches entrepreneurship to early elementary children, so around 5 to 9 years old. And so these are two sisters who believe that they can do anything they set their minds to. And so the first book that we have is Ava and May Own a Lemonade Stand. So this is about when the drinks run out at the summer start fair, Ava and May see an opportunity and a need in their community to use their skills, which is making this amazing lemonade. And they learn along the way how to open their very first business. And so
Mhm.
it's been a really great experience to be able to share this story with the kids, and you can see them get really excited about not only building a lemonade stand, but they have so many different ideas for what Ava and May can do and what they can do in the future. And so,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh my god, I love that. I gotta say, I got myself a copy as well of Ava and May, and the illustrations. The story is fantastic, but the illustrations as well. Are you working with the illustrators? Are part of your team? And tell me
yes,
more about
yeah.
that. Yeah,
Iman Pernell, she is our illustrator. She's super talented.
yeah,
Really awesome. And I'm really excited for the second book. So our second book, Ava and May, The Fabulous Fashion Show,
yeah.
is in the last steps of being created. And so you can see how the illustration style has been similar style, but it's just advancing and advancing. And so it's been amazing working with Iman.
Yes, awesome. Yeah, it's definitely it's beautiful illustrations. And so you mentioned folks having or seeing themselves in a protagonist role and feeling represented. And so that kind of leads to the question of what was your inspiration? Tell us more about the inspiration or the catalyst to want to launch not only the first book, but really this is Looking Lens in general.
Yes. So this is actually it has a even may have a really interesting origin story. So
Okay.
my last year of university, I got an internship as a racial equity advisor for a startup called Ratio Exchange.
Mhm.
And so my I was going to be on the DE and I team. That was my role. And so our job was to look at the landscape of what does Black entrepreneurship look like right now, what resources are in need, what barriers exist. I My degree that I was finishing at the time was a degree in public health. And
Mhm.
so a lot of what I was learning were upstream factors and in the context of health. But a big part of health is a concept that we talk about called social determinants of health.
Mhm.
And so, for example, your something like your zip code, right,
Right.
determines a huge part of your health because of the environmental factors, because of your access to food, your access to education. And so when I was studying public health, I had a really big interest in social justice and thinking of ways that we could
Mhm.
create upstream factors. So the concept of upstream factors, instead of like if you have a sickness, right? And we see that people are getting the sickness. Instead of treating it in an acute way,
Yeah.
we could look upstream and be like, okay, maybe we can just take away a factor so it doesn't even lead to this point, right? So when I was on that team, I kept going back to kids because I'm like, kids are they don't realize they're not getting the messaging that they can have these opportunities and that they can be an entrepreneur and that they can we're not really shown in those roles in the media. And so when we all came together and we're like, okay, what does this landscape look like? How can we use our resources to support Black business ownership? I was talking a lot about education, the school, preschool to prison pipeline, and
Yep.
and we were all coming together. And Michael Farber was who we were working with, and he was like, this is incredible. I love the angle that you're taking. We could do this. We could do that. We could write a book. We do that. And I was like, oh, that's always been something I wanted to do, was to write a children's book. It's always been, like one of those things that is one of your goals sometime in your life. And so I was like, listen, if you're serious, I will do this. So I thought of, I actually don't really remember creating the story itself. But we came up with the concept of a lemonade stand because that's something that a lot of kids can resonate with.
Yep.
And so I came up with the story, the Ava and May story, and I wanted it was important to me that they were sisters, because, part of entrepreneurship, like you can't do it alone. And so getting that like team aspect, I really wanted to show that like Ava and May have different skills that they put together to, and, because that's reality. Like when you work on a team, you're going to have skills and then somebody else is going to have complementary skills, and then you can work to create something great. And so, so I created the story and then I pitched it. They really liked it. And so then I put together a budget and then I got approved to self-publish the first book. And so that is how that started. And then after a year of that and growing that, we kind of came back to it and we're like, hey, we can do something even bigger with this and continue to grow. So, yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it. It's incredible to see, right, how something comes to life out of just a conversation, but also a willingness to be outspoken and share, hey, what can be improved? And so within that context, what can we do, right? What is within our power to positively make an impact? So I love hearing that genesis, the origin story. I'd love to also kind of just hear from you, and it's not a question I've asked you before. So that it's what was your first sale like, or the first time that you like established a partnership, right? Like did you walk out of the room and start dancing, or like what? I always love to hear like kind of entrepreneurs, right? Like what the first time is.
Right. I think that when you asked that, the first thing I thought of was when I actually had the book in hand.
Okay.
Because it had been, at that point, I had a list of people that I knew were going to purchase it. So there wasn't a moment where it was like, oh, this is my first sale. It was kind of like an accumulation of my friends and family that bought it at the same time. But I think that moment where I was like, oh my goodness, was when I got the proof copy in the mail, and I was like, this is physical, because it was such it takes a long time, you know what I mean? Right. Longer than you think. So you have like a set plan, but then it always takes longer than you're assuming. And so it's really great to like look at something digitally and put it together and all the moving parts, and then to be able to see it. And I think another moment, so you asked partnerships. So my first time reading in front of a classroom, that was like a really big moment for me. It was awesome. And it was my mom works in classrooms, and so it was in her classroom that I read the book. And that was, because you have parents read it and you have all these people read it, and but that was the first time I read it, like the physical book, in front of a group of kids. And that obviously made me really nervous, because that's a big, it's like, how this is going to be received, how this is actually going to be received. And it was received really well. And so that was that was a really great moment, because not only was it like, okay, like this is like market validation, right? But then it's also like I'm doing it's having the effect that I wanted it to have, because the kids got really excited. and you could see that they were. So I think that moment of like that first season, it was released in August, so around that fall when I was reading it to the kids. It was really wonderful moments to be able to actually see the effect that I was trying to make like come in front of me, in front of my eyes.
Yeah. And it's like what you're sharing is like, hey, it's real now.
Yeah.
Not only do I have the first copy in my hands, but I mean, even just like you said, like reading to a group, right? All these things become real and tangible. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
You mentioned just a minute ago about market validation, right? Of like, hey, like this is something that my customers want or people want, right? So what was that process like for you in terms of market validation, right? Like as an entrepreneur, you have these assumptions at first, right? And you've developed these hypotheses, and really your role at the beginning, right, is to validate or invalidate these assumptions. So what was that experience like for you? Did you have conversation with folks? Did you do some cold calling, emails? Do you reach out to people on LinkedIn? Love to hear what the process was like for you.
Yeah, that's a good question. So with the first book, I think looking back to the point I'm at now, for books moving forward, now I kind of know what to do. So I know how to do more validation. I know like to set up teams and to do that. At the time, I luckily was working with a team with the startup I was working for. So I was able to get connected to like some teachers and parents, and to be able to ask them like, what do you need? What would help you as a teacher? Like what kind of tools would you need? Does it sound like a good idea? So the market research that I've been doing now, just as we moved into like a more digital space and I know more about the process that it takes to create something and sell it, it's going to look different going forward than what it was. So I think that looking back, I could have done a more thorough process, but it worked out in the end. But yeah, it was more just conversations. And I did a lot of outreach. So I would reach out to, I'm trying to think of the process that I had. Yeah. So like cold email, you know what I mean? And, I would create a template and then send it to a colleague and then be like, hey, could you read this over? And, so yeah, it was just a lot of, someone knows a teacher and someone knows a parent or someone is a parent. Oh, this doesn't sound like a good idea. Yeah. And that was kind of the extent of it.
Love it. Yeah. It can be a messy process, right? It's a little bit of a science, a lot of an art.
Yeah.
But yeah. And was there any particular, what were you in this process? Was there any particular either insight from a customer or potential customer partner or anybody you had a convo with that you hadn't thought of before and that you ended up incorporating either in how you do business or part of your product as well?
Yeah, so that's funny because when we were having the conversations with the teachers, one teacher was like, it's really helpful if there is a series because then you have, as far as like lesson plans go, it creates more of a longevity around what you're doing. And so that's kind of sparked, okay, maybe we shouldn't just make this a book. We should give room for it to grow bigger and make it a series. So I think that was probably one of the biggest pieces of feedback that we got really, really early on that kind of pivoted our direction.
Yeah. Okay, amazing. Love it. And so I want to give some time as well for some folks that are dropping comments in this chat as well to pitch in. So if you have any questions for Brittney, drop them in the chat. We actually have one here, so I'm going to share with you. And so what shocked you the most about working in this space, the space that you're on?
Space. Yeah. So I guess my clarifying question would be, what space? Do you mean like the self-publishing space, or
I'm gonna go and make an assumption, and it's the self-publishing industry.
Yeah. What's shocked me the most? Let me think about this. Okay. What has shocked me the most? I don't know if shocked is like if I was really shocked, but I think things that I've learned is there's not a lot of, you have to make sure like you are the beginning and the end of things. So there's not a lot of, because people can publish. Self-publishing is very, very accessible. so that makes it so you have to make sure that what you're creating is up to industry standard. So
Right.
there's not a lot of checks and balances as far as like putting something out there. And that's why it's so important that you take your time and create a quality product.
Right.
And so I think that, yeah, the most surprising thing, or that would be like the biggest thing that I've learned is that um, just creating and publishing a book is pretty accessible for most people. It's
Yeah.
just being able to create something that is up to industry standard, and
Mhm.
that you have to think about, you know, if you want to, the channel you want to sell through. Do you want to sell through your individual website? Do you
Right.
want to sell through KDP? Do you want to
Right.
be in Barnes and Noble? Because if you want to be in Barnes and Noble, there are a lot of different requirements than if you just want to be on KDP or you just want to physically have a book. And
Yeah.
so I would say, yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Those are good insights, right? And the responsibility of saying, hey, I'm responsible from beginning to end.
you
Right.
really I mean, I honestly, I don't know much about traditional publishing, but
Uh-huh.
it's pretty hands off. But the thing with that is that you don't really get say
Mhm.
about who's involved, and that's why I'm happy that we decided to self publish, because we got a say over who was involved in the creation, and it was
Right.
really important for me that the people involved in the creation of the book reflected who we were representing, and so I
Yeah.
really wanted to get a team of Black women together to be able to create this,
Yep.
and so that's what I did. But with traditional publishing, at least from what I know of it, and I'm not an expert in it, so but
Okay.
what I've been told is that you send in your manuscript and the publishing house basically matches you with an illustrator. You know, you don't have as much control.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But because of that, you have like there's more of a system around you to be able to make sure you have those checks and balances.
Mm.
But for but it's just like entrepreneurship. It's like they
Uh-huh.
call it like an entrepreneur, because you you are creating it. You have to make sure that you work with an editor, you have to find an editor, you find an
Mm.
illustrator, you find this, you find that. But there's not somebody like peer reviewing it for you or having to check it off for you. Like it's you. So
Yeah.
it's a little bit more pressure, but a lot more freedom.
A little bit more, a lot more freedom. Okay, that I think that's a great takeaway
Yeah.
from that process. Oh
Yeah.
my god, I love it. All right, so we have a couple more questions from the comments that we pull in here. And so you're an alumni of the Impact Accelerator from this past summer, the virtual Impact Accelerator, which, by the way, another cohort virtually starting in February. And currently, as happening right now, we have a in-person accelerator in Phoenix, Arizona
It's
as
like
well. I know.
first.
This question pertains to your experience at the Impact Accelerator this year. So the question here from the comments is, well, what is the biggest thing that you've learned by going through the Impact Accelerator? What was of all the things? What was the one you would call the biggest thing that you learned?
Yeah, I think that overall I learned a lot of great things, but I think it was I think just having people to work with gives you a lot of confidence. Just having peers, because as an entrepreneur, there's not a lot of like you don't have a rubric. There's no rubric, and
Right.
so I think being able to, you know, have a soundboard, and have being able to get some perspective,
Mhm.
and see where other people are at, what other people are maybe struggling with, or it gives you perspective. It makes you notice your strengths, and I think for me it gave me a lot more confidence and encouragement.
Mhm.
So I think that that's one of the things that I struggled with between going from undergrad straight to school to this journey, because with undergrad is at least like, especially in like I went to a big research university, and
Uh-huh.
in a lot of those spaces it's very like you have this like really strict standard, you have these rubrics, and it's all like very very comparison. And with entrepreneurship you really, it's like apples and oranges, you can't be comparing yourself to everybody. And so
Yeah.
I think that being able to like have a community was probably the biggest thing, and be able to add, like, you need to be your number one advocate is one of the biggest things that I learned.
Mhm.
um, as far as like content or the curriculum wise, let me think actually, because there was a lot of good stuff that I learned. I think that one thing that I hadn't been thinking about as much, that Seed Spot was like, you need to be thinking about this,
Uh-huh.
would be, looking at yourself, where do you fit in the market? Because we all have all these great ideas, but you have to make sure that, just like with the market validation and looking at like who else is doing that, and how can you offer something, how can you find a gap in that need for your customer base?
Right.
Um, and not sticking, like, don't be too tied to whatever your solution is. Think
Mm,
about the problem that you have and how you can pivot and solve that for your target market.
yeah. That's a good takeaway, right? It's like don't fall in love with your solution. Rather, have the customer, the market, and really the problem you're looking to solve, like tell you what your solution should look like. Right? It's going to
And
be some changes.
that can be difficult, especially
Oh
with, I mean, you take like writing or writing children's books or writing anything or any sort of artistic expression type of thing. It's really personal, you know what
yeah,
I mean? And so I think that in some ways you have to be, if you're in a creative field, and you're also an entrepreneur in a creative field, you have to be kind of split-minded and think, like, okay, these are the, like, cut and dry. This is like what I need to think of, and then you also have to tap into that like creative side to yourself. So
right.
sometimes there's a conflict of interest between the two, but yeah, just being objective and looking at like what is actually happening in the real world. You know what I mean? Because
Yep.
you have this thing and you're wonderful and you can write, you can do all this stuff, but like, how is it gonna like make sure? Let's be practical. Being able to be practical and
Mhm.
pragmatic about things.
Yeah, I think that that's a great segue into this another question that it's from the comments, which has to do back to this like self-publishing industry. And so what are and I'm reading off here of the comments. So what is big mistakes that you think people should avoid when it comes to being this like what do you call it, entrepreneur? Is that an
Yeah.
entrepreneur, right, in the self-publishing or book writing industry? So what is like any mistakes that you either experience yourself
Mhm.
or have seen other folks doing, that you can let people know and to avoid?
Yes. I would say
Hmm.
start your social channels early.
Mm,
Start networking early and don't be shy, because I can be kind of a shy person. And I think that, especially with, the release of the first book, I didn't really know what space I was like. I hadn't experienced that space before.
yeah,
Um, but collaboration is your best friend.
yeah,
Um, it's not, at least from my experience, especially like, depending on the niche of whatever you're trying to publish, like
right.
take your niche. So for me, it's like Black children's book community, right?
Hmm.
Take your niche and make those people your best friends, collaborate with them, have events with them, follow them on Instagram. It's not like you are, and again, I had to kind of change my mindset between going to a research university. It's a very competitive
Right.
space. It's just a lot of, but with the experience that I've had in this space, it's the complete opposite. It's super collaborative. It's not like, oh, you're my competition. It's like we're working together and we have the same goal and we want to help the same people. And
Right.
so, um, yeah, I would say, I looking back, I would be less shy at first,
Uh-huh.
to get the word out, which can be scary, especially if
Yeah.
you've never if you've never ran like social media channels before. You really have to put yourself out there, which can be really intimidating. But then once you see other people do it more and you see like, okay, you know, I like to say, because at first, honestly, the first TikTok I made, I was like, this is so cringy. Like, I cannot do this. Like, I feel so cringy. But you look at everybody that's been really successful
Yeah.
or created something new. It always like looks cringy at first. You know what I mean? Or it always seems cringy. Like, I like to think of like, I love Issa Rae. Issa Rae is one of like my biggest inspirations.
Uh,
And I mean, you look at like the things that she's producing now versus like, I'm sure there was a lot of people telling her that the self-produced things that she was making before were maybe cringy, or maybe she felt like, okay, this is hard to put myself out there, because it's gonna be, in comparison, like you have to start somewhere. And so
yeah.
don't be afraid to get on social media, and don't be afraid to reach out and collaborate with others on social media.
Yeah. That's great advice. Like don't be afraid to just do it.
Just
Right.
do it.
Like it can
Just do it.
feel cringy at first. And I think this just reminds me of a mantra that one of my best friends and often mentors shares, which is like progress before perfection.
Yeah.
Right. And it's
Absolutely.
like, hey, like it's never going to be perfect.
Yeah.
And so might as well get started, because the best time to get started was yesterday and the second best time is today, right? And
Yeah.
so just do it.
Exactly.
Wonderful, Brittany, thank you so much. As we wrap up here, is there any way or anything that we can do to support the work that you're doing? When is your book release? Just like share. Go ahead. This is your space now.
Okay.
Go. How can we help?
Let's see.
Or how
So
can we learn more about you? Yeah.
yeah, so we are working on our second book. The
Mhm.
actual date is still to be determined, but
Okay.
we are gathering people for our launch squad. And so if you want to join our launch squad, you can, it's on, and my link is on Instagram. So if you go to at books by Brittney,
Mhm.
so I don't know, I don't think there's a way to write that, but just
Our team or someone will write
okay,
it down
cool.
in the chat.
Yeah. So in my little link tree, there's a direct link to apply for
Okay.
Launch Squad. And all that is you would receive a free e-copy. And then you would have to agree to leave a review on the day of the launch. And
Okay.
so you're going to get updates, weekly updates leading up as we hit certain milestones in the production of the book. But yeah, so that's what's on deck for us right now.
Cool.
Feel free to visit www.lookinglens.co, which hopefully the team will put down. um, subscribe to our website. We just redesigned the website, and so that way you'll be able to get the newsletter and learn more about any updates and what's going on when the new books are released and what's new on the horizons, because there's a lot of new things coming. So
Amazing,
yeah.
Brittney. Thank you so much for being a part of this, and congratulations on this exciting next step for your business and for your authorpreneurship. I gotta practice this one. And so one last thing as we sign off, what would be, if you could look back at yourself right before you launched, a Looking Lens, and took on this journey, and we're part of the Impact Accelerator. What was the one piece of advice? And this is going to be the last thing that you're going to leave us with. What would be the piece of advice that you give yourself
Give
back then?
myself. Oh,
Yeah.
that's such a good question. What advice would I give myself looking back? I would say I think all of it comes down. It comes down to the same concept of like just do it.
Mm,
Don't like have how do I say have increased confidence, but don't take it as personally,
yeah.
right? So don't take feedback as personally. And I think that just comes from having like a really good sense of self and a really
Mm,
good because like if you're starting out as an entrepreneur, like you're the motor for a lot of things. And
mhm.
so I would say looking back, I would just tell myself that failure is a requirement for success. So don't be afraid.
Mm. Failure is a requirement for success. Words to live by. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you, Brittney Diaz. I appreciate you so much. I'm glad we're able to, you and I, to connect so much this month. Has been awesome.
Always great to talk to you.
All right. Well, you take care. Say hello to sunny Brooklyn for me. And I'll see you again. Thank you, everybody, for joining us as well. Cheers.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.